Hi, my name is Soma Jurgensen and welcome to the Subject Matter Expert Showcase. I'm very excited to present to you this presentation on proposals that persuade and being able to create business proposals that will help your business grow and create solutions to opportunities you might find in your organization. Let me introduce myself. I'm Soma Jurgensen. I am the State Program Coordinator for Minnesota and North Dakota in the School of Business for Rasmussen College. I'm also the owner of SDJ Marketing Solutions, and what I do through my consulting company is strategic planning consulting, marketing, sales, and customer service planning, and professional development. I've had more than 10 years of experience in marketing and management for everything from local to international companies, and for the last 8 years I've had my specific expertise in business and professional education. So throughout this presentation I'm going to use examples from things that I might have encountered with clients, of course generalized, and also ideas that have been brought up by students. So let's get started. As we go through the presentation, if you have questions, please know that there's a variety of ways that you can ask them. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and YouTube, and then there are some people monitoring questions, and I'll take them at specific spots throughout the presentation. So I look forward to answering those for you. But what are you going to get out of this presentation? It's always important to start with that. And in this presentation, you will be able to explain the characteristics of persuasive proposals once we're done. You'll also understand how to organize parts of a proposal and choose content for that organization that is powerful, that's persuasive. And so when you are revising, that you know which specific facts to leave in and which to leave out. You'll be able to effectively balance the costs and the benefits to be most persuasive, and naturally the ask will come about. So don't forget to include that at the end of your proposal. But it will be very difficult to say no by following this process. So how do we start? Let's first understand what the purpose of proposals are. And there are multiple types of proposals, both internal, so those that are written for your own company, and external, those that are written for other companies that typically have a sales bent to them. So a proposal is a persuasive document. It is a detailed plan of action, so it is not something that is general. And there's a specific action that you want the reader to take. So as the writer, you want to make sure that those two things, your plan of action and the action that you want, support each other. Okay? And winning proposals, so that's the purpose. Now really effective proposals are realistic, right? That you've done your homework, you know it can be done. They're carefully researched. So you're supporting your ideas with observable examples, statistics, relevant facts. They're SMART, and so many of you might know that acronym: specific, measurable, agreed upon or aligned with company objectives, realistic, and time-bound. And they're visually appealing, so you want to make it easy for your reader to digest the information. But most important is this last point. They must be written from the reader's perspective, not your perspective. So in this case, what you want comes out secondarily. So how do you do this? How do you take a reader's perspective? There's two questions that you should be asking. First, what makes your reader successful? Is their focus in their job on incremental sales? Is it reducing cost inefficiencies? Is it hiring better people? Is it safeguarding the company's reputation? Is it keeping employees safe in the workplace? And once you know that, then your question is, how does your proposal support that success? Right? So if you're not supporting their success, their decision doesn't have to go your way. So these are the two most important questions to ask as you're trying to create this winning proposal. So thinking like the reader, absolutely throughout. As you're organizing, you're previewing your idea, you're revealing your solution, solving it, and then leading to the ask, specifically asking for what it is that you want. And there is a common organization for many proposals. First is the purpose. This is your, making your first impression in 90 seconds. Okay, this is your one paragraph, about 3 sentences, that says why you're writing, how you're solving their problem, and what their future will look like with their problem solved in 3 short sentences, and it will determine whether they read on or not. So tremendously important. We'll go each of these sections. The problem allows you to walk the reader through their missed opportunity the way that you see it, and really show them how then your solution fills their gap. Right? In the cost benefit, you illustrate to them that yes, your idea is worth it and it's doable. And finally, you ask for what you want. Now, I will be clear, my presentation today really is geared toward Western business audiences. If you're writing for an international audience, you might need to make some adjustments to your conclusion. I want to stop here just at this overview time and make sure that I'm asking for any questions that you might have about the proposal process. We have a couple, so I'm going to start with those. We have a question from Amy on YouTube. Do all proposals have the same organization? All right, so I will say, yes, Amy, all proposals should have the same organization. You might label them differently. Okay, so you might label the purpose as your introduction. It really depends on your style, but in one way or another, you should go through each of these sections in any proposal. We have a question from Sam on Facebook, and the question is, are all sections on a proposal the same length? No, they're not the same length, and they won't be the same length every time you write a proposal. The purpose will typically be about the same length, about 3 sentences or so. Your problem statement or your solution might vary depending on any pre-work you've done with your client. And I'll give you an example when we get to the problem statement. Their cost benefit might be very short, it might be very detailed. So you really want to tailor this to what your reader needs from you, but make sure everything is included in your process. Okay. Are there other questions that have come through as I've asked? Okay, fantastic. Let's go on to the next slide. I want to talk about the purpose statement. And one way to think of the purpose statement is as your movie trailer or pitch. Right? Let me give you an example. So the screenwriter for Aliens wanted to pitch the idea for Aliens. And he came upon the producer and said, I have this great idea for a movie. It's Jaws on a spaceship. That's it. One sentence, Jaws on a spaceship. And in that one sentence, the screenwriter was able to connect to the success of Jaws and to the popularity of space movies and propose an answer to a gap that that screenwriter could fill. And the resulting movie series was Aliens. So it's very short. It's about a paragraph, right? And in it, you want to identify the problem, preview the solution, and illustrate a better future, all in a few short sentences, right? So you might think, well, how do I do this? Let me give you an example. And this is of a service company. So imagine that I'm an HR consultant, and I've worked with and identified an organization that has been growing quickly, and their orientation needs have stripped beyond what their current HR department can offer. They also, from their interactions with the company, know that they're rolling out a new branding effort and want to make sure that the branding and company culture extends throughout the southern states, and that's not happening. So in my purpose statement, I might say to XYZ company, XYZ company is growing so quickly, the current staff is not able to meet onboarding needs. As an HR consultant, I'll go into my solution, I am able to provide consistent orientation to all new hires and ensure the company's culture is preserved. Right, so I know that the preservation of culture and getting everyone on board is very important to this company. Right, and you'll see me use this example as we go through, but I'll also use a product example so you can see how that works in a proposal as well. So in this case, you're presenting the problem as an opportunity. So first, I'm showing that a problem exists. Right? So you have to answer that question. How is it a missed opportunity? And then you want to make sure to define the scope. How long has it been going on? Why is it happening? For whom is it an issue? Right? This is one stage where you might not have a tremendous amount of detail specifically in your proposal, and I'll give you an example. I'm working with a client where we went over a lot of this in our initial meeting. So we talked about what it is that she wants, we talked about how long it's been going on, why, who's impacted, and I kind of drew out relevant statistics and facts from her so she discovered the opportunity with me. Right then, when I wrote my proposal, I had a very short problem statement that referred back to our conversation and my notes from that conversation before I moved to the next stage. But you're not always going to have that agreement. Sometimes you're going to send a proposal cold. And in that case, you really need to support your symptoms through relevant statistics. Now, I did this face-to-face. You might have to do this in writing. Okay, so if your audience is not receptive, you need to lead the reader through the discovery of that problem the way you see it, because the way you see it led to your solution. You want to summarize the symptoms before you give your diagnosis and prescribe your solution. So you're thinking a bit like a medical professional here. Right? And you're doing this because you want to reduce resistance to spending the costs that you're going to identify. You want to build your credibility. You will never finish doing homework, I will tell you as a teacher. You need to do that research. And you're establishing the case for your solution. So let me give you a service example. And this is the HR consultant again. So I might detail that in my problem statement that XYZ has grown from 50 to 500 employees in 3 years. So you notice I'm identifying the scope here. The HR department of 5 is still responsible for onboarding. So if the CEO of XYZ Corporation didn't realize that how big the growth was and thought that maybe his HR people needed training, maybe they didn't have the right plans, now the CEO sees that these 5 people have gone from onboarding 10 employees each to 100 employees each. And they're discovering the problem with me. Third, because you have to measure the impact of this gap, new employee satisfaction has declined by 45% from 3 years ago. So yes, it's affecting the company. And customer satisfaction complaints have increased 20% in 3 years. Okay, so I'm repeating or including relevant statistics that impact what the CEO is interested in, what makes the CEO successful. Okay, so this is a service example. I would like to give you a product example. Right? In this case, imagine that I have a new accessory to sell. Right? It's a bag. And there's tons of accessories. I happen to be addicted to handbags, but not everybody has as many handbags as I do, right? So in this case, I want to sell this handbag, but I need to reduce resistance, build my credibility, and establish my case. So I'm not going to try and sell my handbag to Coach. It has a unique feature. I'm going to try and sell it to Boost Mobile. And let me show you how. First, I will explain to Boost Mobile that cell phone sales is reaching saturation in the US. Now, I haven't included specific numbers here, but you can find them all in Pew Research's website. We'll give you specific examples, but I wanted to keep the slide uncluttered. All right. Second, typical Americans carry 3 or more devices at a time on average. Right? So I'm showing Boost Mobile, you're not getting as many incremental sales with your cell phone. You have to wait until an iPhone or some new version comes out. But typical Americans are carrying 3 or more devices. And 33% of those Americans consider access to their devices at all times. That's a main concern. How do I stay connected all the time? And there are a few high-end accessories on the market that meet the need to carry 3 or more devices with ease. But guess what? Mine does. My handbag carries 3 or more devices very elegantly. And if you can reach only 1% of this potential market, you have an incremental sale of $23,000. So I'm building the case for this opportunity. Okay, now if I were selling to Coach, I would build it differently. But I know Boost Mobile is looking for incremental sales. Okay, this is an example. So what have I done in my problem definition? 3 things. I've provided quantifiable, observable details. Right? You're not always going to have employee retention numbers, but look up research on what happens when employees are not or don't go through proper or onboarding. So there's research out there for you to use. Second, document the scope of the problem. Make sure the reader sees it the way that you do. And then relate the problem to the reader's priorities. Is it reputation? Is it sales? And now, and only now, are you able to hit them with your solution. Okay. Now, smart solutions. We'll talk about that a little bit, but this is the part that either businesses overemphasize, they start with their solution and don't follow through the discovery process, or they forget to explicitly state it because they've been thinking about it so much. So in this case, you want to state very clearly what your solution is and your plan, how you are qualified to meet this need. You want to relate it directly back to the problem. What a bummer if you have this beautiful, elegant problem statement and your solution is not relatable. You may see it in your mind, but you have to be explicit about how your solution meets that problem. Show the plan is workable, right? If this is going to cost millions of dollars, you know they don't have millions of dollars, that's a problem. Now, you're not going to go into full detail because that's coming up later. And then you make it smart. Now, most people know SMART, and I reviewed it earlier, but I want to make it very specific to proposals. So when you write a SMART solution, you should be using specific, concrete language. You'll talk about how you'll measure success. Okay, so I might say, for the HR example, the 2 of the things we'll measure are customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction. So we want to see X% increase after we put this plan in place. Is it aligned with corporate goals? In the case of the HR consultants, absolutely, because they want this new rebranding and company culture, and of course, happy employees, happy customers will equal more sales. Is it challenging but realistic? Right, so I'm hiring 1 HR consultant, and I have 500 employees. You have to show how your solution meets whatever the gap is that you've found. And finally, what's the timetable? Right? If this is a 3-year contract, if this is a quick fix, you need to make that clear in your solution. Right? So these are some of the basics and overview of the solution. We're going to go into it in a little more detail, but I want to pause here and I want to take some questions. And we do have a couple. So I have a question from Jeremy on YouTube. Shouldn't the business already know the problem? This is a great question. It's not that the business hasn't necessarily experienced the problem, but what you want to do is help them discover it with you so that your solution is the natural solution. Okay? So they might see that there's a problem with orientation, but they may not realize the scale of it, and certainly not that hiring an HR consultant is the solution. You might realize you're struggling with new sales and incremental sales, but they might never have even thought of a pouch that carries three devices. You're leading them through that problem in the way that leads to your solution. Right? So there's multiple ways to look at the problem, and you want to help them see it through both their eyes and your eyes. We have a question from Sarah also on YouTube, and the question is, why is the solution different from the cost benefit? As you notice, I haven't talked about the cost benefit yet. I've only talked about the solution. That's a great question, Sarah, and my answer to you is, before you talk about what this is going to cost, you have to convince them that you know what you're doing, right? So that you are explicitly saying, I'm going to solve your problem in this way. It's going to take about this amount of time, and I have a plan in place. Now let me explain to you what the cost and benefit is. So they're together in a similar section, but they're not the same thing. So why don't I move on and show you how those costs and benefits work in a proposal. So I use weigh costs and benefits, not state costs and benefits. And the reason I do that is because when you look at the resources that your solution is going to need, and don't just look at money, but also look at time, people, right? You'll need to show that benefits that there's more benefits than there are costs, right? The benefits come out on top. And you want those benefits to be from your reader's perspective. Yes, if you sell them this new handbag, you make money, but more importantly to them, they make money. And you want to relate to the mission and the core values. So if I'm appealing to Boost Mobile, it's not going to be any handbag. It has to be fashionable. It has to be fashion forward. It has to be urban, because that matches their brand. Okay? So in that case, I want to make sure that the mission and what I have to offer are connected. So let's look at some more specifics here when it comes to costs. Now, often you'll look at things like money, time, people, materials, but don't forget opportunity costs. So accounting folks, you'll understand this. There's also the cost of lost income. Right? There's the cost of lost reputation, lack of safety, because that comes with a lot of expenses, unrealized opportunities. So it's costing you money because you can't take advantage of this. All those fall under costs. Right? Benefits, right? And this is where you do talk about revenue, of course, right? So if they're losing money, you want to show that your solution brings in money. If they're losing money because they're not taking advantage of a niche market, you want to show your benefit takes advantage of that market and brings in revenue. But there are other benefits you also want to list. Convenience, success in the market, so market leadership, leadership in general, the company's reputation, engagement with employees and customers, inspiration in their industry, confidence of the consumer. These are all also benefits that can be added to the column. And quite honestly, I put a table in. I put a table and list the costs and estimate, and the benefits and estimate. You can't always estimate reputation, but I make sure to include it in my table. Right? So your benefits must outweigh the cost. Now listen to some of these verbs. When I conclude my cost and benefits statement, I want to show how the company saves money, saves time, increases productivity, increases efficiency, increases safety, and makes more money. If I can show that, then the final step, the conclusion, is so natural. It just comes, right? So let's look at just a review of the solution statement, because we did it in 2 sections. Solution statements should be explicit. Make sure you say exactly what you're going to do. Emphasize how it answers the problem you've helped them discover. Categorize and itemize the costs. Don't be afraid of showing them what it's going to cost, okay? Because you've done your research. You know the benefits outweigh those costs. And then reinforce the benefits. And then very, very naturally, you end up transitioning to the conclusion itself. And so this is really important, particularly if you have a sales proposal. And I don't know how many times I see this missing. Okay? This is where you say, sign on the dotted line, order today, click here now. Right? The conclusion is the time to ask for what you want. And so you remind the reader that the changes necessary create a sense of urgency. Emphasize the benefits of making that decision. Paint a picture of success and ask for the sale. So let me give you an example again with this client where we talked about the problem statement. And so in my proposal to her, and I did this in the form of a letter. You can do your proposal in many forms, letters, memos. It's up to you. So I reminded her what she wanted, right? She wanted our work together, our consulting, to result in a revenue she doesn't have right now, and one that needs to be a bit more passive. So she can't be, so she does speaking and gets paid to speak, but then she needs to bring in money when she is physically not there as well. So in that sense, I said, okay, well, this is how much this project is going to cost. This is how much my time costs. But just look, all you have to do is sell this many books, sell this many ebooks, get one speaking engagement, and you've not only covered the cost of this project, but you are bringing in profit. Right? And that's when I say, so since we need to get started right away and have product to you by December, please sign here with approval. I'll send you an invoice for the first half of my fees, and we'll get started. It's funny because this is a sales organization that I'm working with. So the call that I got back was, can't believe you sold a salesperson. Why? Because their company doesn't regularly list out costs and benefits. It didn't make sense to say no to me, because what she'd be doing is saying no to profit, right? And in that way, I was able to make sure that I concluded very powerfully my argument of why to hire me. I want to circle back to our objectives before I take final questions. So please, if you do have questions, prepare them, send them through our different platforms. But we talked about in this presentation, you've learned the characteristics of persuasive proposals. What should be in it? What is a proposal for? How to organize one. You can make modifications based on what your end user needs, but you know what all the components are. That you choose the content that persuades. Okay, so you're choosing those details, specific language, that leads the reader to your solution, and revising those sections for power. So how related is it? How specific is it? How smart is it? And then how to balance the costs and benefits. Don't be afraid of this section. If you find that it costs way more to hire you than the benefits you're providing, find a new solution. Right? This is a great check for you. And finally, articulate the ask. You'll find if you do the other sections of the proposals well, this will come so naturally, they won't be able to say no. All right. So with that, I'll take some final questions. And lots of activity on YouTube today. I have a question from Alex on YouTube. What do I do if my audience is from or lives in another country? I'm going to get to that in just a second, Alex. I'm actually going to start with this question from Lucy on Facebook because I want to give your question a little more time. The question from Lucy is, why can't I find examples of business proposals on the internet? The reason is this, quite honestly. Good proposals make you money. And if you're going to write and have a formula for a good proposal, most people don't want to give it away. So they're going to ask you to pay for it. You're going to pay for templates. Okay. But we've just gone through how you do it, the organization. Now it's up to you to put it together. It's not rocket science, but it does make you money. And that's why it's hard to find it. So you can find some things out there, but they'll be more general than this presentation today. Now, Alex, what do you do if your audience is from another country? You need to do some work on global research and competency. Right? So in, for example, Latin American countries, it's far more relationship-oriented. Wouldn't jump straight into the purpose statement. I might start with an introduction that talks about how long we've been working together, how our relationship has evolved, how we have worked together in the past. And then toward the end, I might suggest a conversation in order to get to my ask. If you are working with people from China or Japan, the process is a little different. Countries is a little different. So that's a whole nother presentation, but do know that you'll have to make some adjustments, not in your discovery of the problem and solution necessarily, but in the way that you open and close with those audiences. Are there any other questions? Well, with that, I hope you found considerable value in our presentation and that you are excited and able to use these tools right away. Thank you.